Tabletops will start after the following messages.
Hey everyone, it's me, Nick, from the Tabletop Podcast. When I'm not hosting, I'm thinking about ways to create a better podcast for you guys, and I think I landed on something pretty fun. In fact, if you go to our Patreon at patreon.com/tabletop and join for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to a new episode a month that we're going to start putting out. In fact, we're going to be calling this one Wild Magic, I think, in that we're going to talk about anything and everything that interests us, not just TTRPGs, though there will be a lot of that. It is truly unhinged, and if you are a fan of the podcast and all of the hosts, you're definitely going to want to be on it. We're thinking of dropping these at the end of each month, so join our Patreon today. That is patreon.com/tabletop. Oh, and there's going to be so much more coming out in the new year there, so don't miss it. Sign up today.
Welcome back to Tabletops, your source of whimsy and merriment in the TTRPG space. Today, we're going back and reviving the past, chatting OSR. Joining me today are some of the regulars. Introduce yourself, fellas. On my right, your left is...
Hi, your left.
I'm Shade. Talking to you, sitting at home.
Oh,
I'm Shade. That threw me. I'm usually last.
so my back is to the audience?
Yes.
Stagecraft 101. Never be this guy.
Diagonally across.
And diagonally across.
It's me, your boy Rio, OSR novice.
And the man of the hour coming in on that Led Zeppelin is...
It's me, Franco.
And I'm your host, Nick. And we are talking about OSR today.
Oh man, that quick.
That dismount.
Listen, I'll read any introduction you guys write for me. I told you. It said old-timey radio voice, and I fucking will try. Okay, so today we're talking about the OSR. 2024 marks the 50th anniversary of D&D, and it is sort of a different game than when it started.
Sort of.
Yeah, and like 20 years ago, when Wizard of the Coast first kind of acquired the property and published 3E, there was a lot of conversations cropping up online about like the good old days, and then the OSR kind of came out of
the
that.
old school revival
or Renaissance.
Or Renaissance.
Yeah. I thought it was original soundtrack retro gaming.
Yes,
Yeah,
that too.
Fuck, that sounds cool. What is that?
And this was all kind of from the original
like Dungeon
OGL
Synth?
as well.
Yeah.
No, it's more like dwarf metal, if you've seen
Oh, okay. It's tight.
And yeah, so why don't we talk a little bit about what the OSR is, and then we can talk about some of the games that use the system and what kind of makes the system up as a whole. So, Franco, what is the OSR?
Yeah. Oh God. Jesus. If
I can help you.
No, it's a lot. There's a lot of stuff going on, and if we want to start from the beginning, let's just do it really briefly. It's a very long history. It's been going on for so long at this point. That it has, people have said it should die. People have said it has died already. People have said that it's over. It's been replaced by other things, whatever. But anyway, I think the OSR was originally just a revival of the old rules, using the OGL, which like allowed people to just like use the old versions of D&D and like adapt them and stuff, and just basically rewrite them. Yep. A lot of things are like reworks of, usually there's three major categories, right? It would be like the original D&D, the first edition.
The red clones.
Yeah, huh?
The retro clones.
Like it starts with the retro clones, basically Gygax and Arneson's original D&D, and then the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons line, the first and second edition, and then the sort of the sister line, I guess, the basic expert, companion, master, Beckme. This is a line that ran alongside AD&D. Yeah. It's called Basic D&D, okay. And then there were more. It's called Beckme. Yeah, there's Basic and Advanced, and it was supposed to be kind of a rewrite and advancement of OD&D, the original D&D. And it was basically like, it's Basic, Expert. I'm just gonna try to get them all out. Basic, Expert, Companion, Master, and Immortal. And so it was basically like the idea was you would level up to level 4, I think, in Basic, and then you could switch over to AD&D. But they were like, oh, let's rewrite Basic, and then they just started coming out with more.
Yeah.
And so usually people, when they're referring to Basic and Expert, they say like B/X. So if you've ever seen that. And then, yeah, those are all like kind of the 3 strains of OSR type games. And then there are games that are sort of related to those. And then there are games from what some people call the New School Revolution, the NSR, that kind of like reconstruct these games into like different rules patterns. So we can talk about those too, because those are really the ones that I'm more interested in.
Yeah. Right.
Games that started with Knave, which was like, I don't know, I want to say like it started with Knave, but like Knave is an example of a game that is like compatible.
OSR adjacent.
Yeah, I mean, I would call it OSR still because it is very compatible with Basic and Expert, Dungeons and Dragons, and I think AD&D as well. So it's really compatible with those. And then there's games like Into the Odd, which started a whole new family of games.
That's its own system, yeah.
It's its own system, but it has sort of the same vibes, and it sort of starts to like rethink like what is a hit point, what is a stat, like what are we doing here?
That's your favorite question.
Yeah, what are we doing?
No, what is a hit point?
Yeah, what is a hit point?
I hear you say that all the time. What is a hit point?
What is a hit point? There's an answer. There's a right answer and a wrong answer. And then there's the white hack, there's the black hack. There's a lot of the retro clones
Red hack, blue hack.
I don't think there's a pink hack.
No? Nutty, green.
Yeah, the black hack I think is the one that pioneered blackjack rolls, and those are really cool. And then
like push your luck kind of thing.
No, it would be like so you have so like you would roll under a stat. So if you like your stat is like 16,
Excuse me.
you would roll under the stat for 16. But then there's also a difficulty floor, so a difficulty value, and then you roll above that. So you're rolling between these two numbers, and the DM will so like you're incorporating your skill, and then you're incorporating the difficulty of the task.
Right.
I'm really getting off topic.
I was gonna say, isn't that in at least advanced or 2E? I think there's stuff like, I mean, THAC0's kind of that, but not exactly.
THAC0's kind of like that. THAC0 is really weird. We don't have to talk about THAC0.
Do you like graphs in your TTRPGs?
Look at THAC0. You know, armor class was originally like, armor class was originally descending. So like armor class 1 is better.
So
armor class 2.
A 10 is the maximum, I think, and the maximum like bad. Worst.
Maximum bad. Yeah.
Yeah, the highest number and the worst value.
Yeah. And then like you could even go into the negatives, and that was sort of based on like I think like a war game where like you were like a battleship.
Yeah.
It's like you played as like with battleships or whatever. And so like the armor class was like the armor rating. Like, oh, you're like the number 1 armor class.
Yeah. And that's even reflected in modern like, 3E through 5E D&D games where a big creature may have a low armor class because it's easier to hit the broadside of a barn as opposed to but it may also offset it with like thick scales and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Dragons.
I think a hit point is also I think it's like the amount of damage or like a torpedo or something that you need to like sink a battleship or whatever. And it's like how much HP does a human have?
I can only take 1 torpedo.
I guess I have 1 hit point.
I could take 1 stab from a D4 dagger. I think I'd be out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about his like
it's complicated.
Yeah,
That's
like
my
you
answer.
were saying, is that OSR is a lot of different things. Is there a unifying like rule set or philosophical thing?
There's a philosophical piece called the Principia Apocrypha, I think it's called. It's by various people. I think Matt Finch, is that right?
Yeah, Matt Finch.
Matt Finch, and then Ben Milton has a couple of quotes in there as well. It's basically like a bunch of people contributed to this like sort of treatise and like how to run OSR games, and a lot of the principles, I guess, are translated in a lot of these games that may just look completely different from one another, but are usually what the principles are. It's usually like fiction first, a lot of I wish I could remember. It's basically just how I run my games now.
Yeah.
Even though I run a 5e game, I run a 5e campaign right now, but I'm just using a lot of OSR principles. Yeah, I wouldn't call them rules. I would call them principles.
Because like in every OSR game or like adjacent game that I've played, it's something where it's like whereas in current D&D you are sort of
you are a hero, which kind of puts you into
You're superhero.
Yeah, you're a superhero. You're somebody outside of the normal. Like you said, Rio, like you can take dagger hits and shrug them off. Whereas in any game that I've played that is more OSR heavy, like the bent is towards that kind of philosophy, it's much more like you're just a normal person.
Yeah.
And what you have on you is going to really define who you are and like what your base skill sets are.
Yeah.
And that could mean like in Morkborg that you're going to die, like you have 1 hit point sometimes because you're just like, that's not your character, right? That your character isn't about being a big beefy dude. It's like you just don't have many hit points.
And I think that's why I just don't like to play them.
Because it's much more like...
I like the superhero aspect of gaming, I think, more than the realistic...
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's more like heroic rather than like sometimes you're a normal person, sometimes you're just a hero. But I think like 5e and 3e like really introduce like the superheroic kind of level. And I guess like Beckme did because there's like an immortal, you can like literally be a god or whatever. And I think AD&D does that too.
Yeah.
But I think there's like a lot of people, I guess, they want to go back and then they want to.
We gotta go back.
I think a lot of there's another couple of principles that are around like. Creative problem solving versus like rolling, like role playing, not role playing. And then rulings, not rules, meaning like, don't adhere too closely to the rule books. And so a lot of the new games will be really rules light so that the referee is allowed to reinforce things. There's also the person being called a referee rather than like a dungeon master or something like that, which is just kind of like, oh, well, you're like mediating the world. You're presenting the world in a what's it called? A dispassionate kind of what's it called?
You're just calling balls and strikes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're an impartial arbiter.
Yeah.
You're not like I'm gonna win.
Yeah.
Yeah. It requires a lot of trust.
Yeah. So one thing I want to kind of ask is, what is the difference between just playing one of these older games and the new OSR? Because they are different and they kind of have drifted apart.
Well, I also wanted to say that a lot of people said that when 5e came out that it's an OSR game. Yeah. Because there's a lot of things in 5e that are heavily influenced from this revolution that happened after 3e. Yeah. A lot of developments, and then 4e happened, which is like a total departure.
Is there a specific mechanic that is
There's like a few things, right?
Yeah, there's a variety of things. I will say that like, so... And I'll cite this. OSR Simulacrum is a blog spot. I think that they did a great job, or do a great job of kind of breaking down the types of OSR games. They say there's classic OSR, or classic games, which are like specifically the retro clones and things like that. Or modifications of original D&D. There's OSR adjacent, which they say is stuff that wants to capture the vibe. But maybe, has some other stuff, usually focusing on resource management and high lethality. So 5e hardcore mode is like a version of that.
What is hardcore mode?
It's essentially just a
hack.
5e hack that focuses more on like, hey, you wandered into this place without real good preparation and you died. So like that's
Shadow Dark is also it's been kind of touted as like an in-between where it's like, Five Torches Deep is another one that is like really kind of straddles the line.
You walk up to someone at a bar, be like, hey, you okay? I'm Five Torches Deep.
and then the third would be like NSR or new OSR, which is rules light and emphasizes player agency.
So like Merkborg is more like new OSR type of thing because it's like really, really rules light. And then it's more just about like pushing the fiction first rather than like thinking about
it has a
how do you
resolving
roll
mechanic, but that's really all it is because you can it like you said, it's more the referee being like, that's fucking sick. This is what happens.
It's like that makes sense or that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's like you can try that, but I don't think it'll work.
Yeah.
Or like you probably won't work.
Yeah.
Based on what you've seen.
Especially in Morkborg.
Yeah. Troika's another game that is very cool, but I don't think I understand it very well.
Okay. Yeah.
And then
and you also mentioned previously Traverse Fantasy, which has done a good grouping of the families of rules.
Yeah, I love her blog. Yeah. She has one as well on just like a long, like if you want to learn more about this so that we don't have to just fucking tear your ear off about like all of the history or whatever. She has like a long list of like seminal blog posts from the OSR because basically the OSR just like happens on blogs is kind of what they say. It's just like it used to be on like Google Plus, and then that died, and so people just like there's just like a chain of blogs that all like interact with each other and like come up with like theory crafting and stuff like that.
It's something I really do like. Yeah. There's a double-edged sword here, but I do like that about the OSR community is that it is very conversational.
Yeah.
Because each of these games is
in conversation
with another one, reacting to another one. And I do think that's very fascinating.
I mean, like even just like some blogs will just come up with concepts and not come out with games. Right. Like Necropraxis has the hazard die resolution system, which is a very influential system where in basic and expert D&D and maybe other versions of D&D, you would roll a d6 to, trigger an encounter when you're in a dungeon like every like 10 minutes, like in-game time, or like every time you like push a door open really loudly or whatever. And then you would roll a d6 every, 2 turns, every 2 10-minute turns. And then basically he just overloaded it. So like this concept of overloading a die. It's like, oh, okay, on the 1, the monster appears. What happens on the rest of the numbers?
Yeah.
And so like on 2, you see like a sign of the monster. On 3, like you get tired, you have to like, take a rest or something like that. Or something bad happens to you, like you lose an HP or like in Cairn, you might take fatigue or something like that. And on a 6, it's free, and I think on a 5, like something related to the dungeon occurs, like the waters rise or like steam.
Torches sputter out.
Oh yeah, that's one too. Like, because you also would track torches and lanterns and stuff, and so that's also been like randomized by like being like, oh, if you roll a 5, then your torch starts guttering out. If you roll a 5 again, they go out. So relight them. So that's a thing that you can take or leave.
Yeah.
It's a lot about like procedures instead of like rules, where you're like, oh, this is a rule instead of like this is a method that you can use to facilitate gameplay.
So are these systems like you said, are they just like various mechanics that you can choose to use or not kind of wrapped up together, or are they comprehensive systems?
Some of them are games, some of them are just things that people say on a blog, some of them are like ideas that you can just cobble together from other things. It's everywhere. It's everywhere, and people are pretty free and giving. And also, as we learned in the OGL scandal, rules cannot be copyrighted. So you're free to like take stuff and and other people, like Necropraxis's hazard die system is released under a Creative Commons license. So you can take his text and just credit him.
What I get the thing that I'm interested in a little bit still though is like why don't people just play the old versions of D&D if
they are very poorly written.
Okay.
that is
people
why.
do, but people play them.
People do play them, yeah.
Because they're the first drafts of the gaming world that we have now. So I'd imagine they just don't hold up.
Original D&D is completely unreadable.
Yeah,
it's
2E is a better place for you if you really want something like that.
And really, that's why people wrote these retro clones in the first place. I'm sure some people are like pissed that I'm even saying that, but I think most people would agree.
But everyone's also entitled to their opinions.
Yeah,
just
people are entitled to their opinions.
Yeah,
but I think for me, it is not readable. There's something like Old School Essentials, which is a rewrite of Basic and Expert D&D, which does a much better job of encapsulating the rules than the original version of Basic and Expert did.
Yeah.
There is Traverse Fantasy's Fantastical Magic Medieval Campaigns, which is a really fun read. It's a rewriting of the original D&D rules.
Yeah.
The original D&D rules are like contradictory. They leave a lot of gaps. There's a lot of weird rules that I wish I could list them all, but I'm sure somebody else has done that in a much more interesting way.
One other thing that you guys have kind of brought up a couple of times is that like character or player creativity is like the gem at the middle of all of these.
Yeah,
Can
it's
you kind of
player agency.
Yeah, can you kind of explain what that means a little bit more, and like what is the difference between someone like thinking up of like an interesting use of like a spell or something in 5e versus like an OSR approach to
I have a lot. I have so much to say about this.
Yeah, me and Shane are just looking at each other, but I'll get something out really quick, I guess. Player agency is kind of at the heart of a lot of this stuff, at least for me anyway. Like I guess if we talk about OSR stuff, maybe I would just talk about like how I philosophically run my games and like what I've internalized from what I've learned from them.
Yeah.
Because it's not fair to say like, oh, I'm part of the OSR. Like it's dead.
Yeah.
It's like we already revived them and now everybody's playing other shit.
Yeah.
Or like I am. Like I don't know if I would really, but it's like it's a branding thing too.
Yeah.
But really, I think player agency is really crucial because it lets you run games that are easier to run as a DM because you don't have to keep them on track. You don't have to be like, oh, I really need them to get to this plot point or that plot point or whatever. It's if they're interested in something, they'll go after it. Like in my current campaign, they made a Google Sheets document because I really should have done this for them, but they made a Google Sheets document themselves because I guess I just didn't, of all the loose threads that they have.
Yeah.
And I progressed those loose threads in the backgrounds with random rolls because I'm not going to sit down and think about like, what does Maud the Six-Eyed Pirate Queen think about this and what's she going to plan on doing later? Yeah. Really fun character I made up. Like what is she going to do next or whatever? It's like, well, like I don't want to decide that. Like maybe I do. Like maybe I would, but I don't have to because I can just sort of like naturally progress. Like I just list out what are her goals, and then see if she makes any progress towards those goals. Like what's her ultimate goal, and then what are all her sub goals, and that's how you keep the world alive. Yeah. And so you keep the world alive and moving in the background while the players are reacting to them. You place your little dungeons and the things that they get interested in. That's what you pursue. If they're like, oh, I'm interested in this, is great. I'm going to write some more stuff about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's really just about like, for me anyway, like letting them choose what they want to do, and then that's not necessarily like the only way to do it. That's more like a hex crawl way of doing it. Yeah. But there's definitely ways where you can do it in a more like, oh, this is like a city focused campaign, or this is just going to be in one mega dungeon. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I have to say. What are you gonna?
I was just gonna say that
creative uses of like a fireball.
Exactly. Yeah, because like one thing that we have in our little notes app here about what we're talking about is like the OSR really doesn't let you, but it doesn't focus so much on the players having a toolbox of things that they use. It's more about like, what are you thinking about trying, and like, how would you go about that?
I mean, one of the tools in your tool, so like, I quite enjoy like Cairn. Like, I think that's a rule system I really want to play more.
I like caring about you too, buddy.
And so Rio's just silent because he hates all
Rio's
of this.
here.
Rio's like, man, I don't fucking like. I want to play any of these
I don't
games.
know any of these things you've mentioned. I don't know any of these blogs. I don't know any of these people.
I'm sorry.
I'm just chilling.
That's how I was when you guys were talking about Fallout. I was like, I don't know. What were we talking about? Useful creative ways of using Fireball.
Yeah.
So the thing that 5e does with spells is it really specifies exactly what every spell does. Right. Whereas in something like Basic and Expert, or in like OD&D, or even AD&D, actually I don't know. I've never read AD&D. I have no interest in it. It can go kick rocks.
Planescape.
I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I'm sure the worlds and shit are cool, but I just have no interest in the rule set. But like the spells are less well defined. And there's a lot of different like spell systems that you can use, like Cairn and stuff is like very, very vague, and Knave has like you can just generate spells with like just rolling on a table with like 2 words on it, and you just be like, oh, these are interesting words. What could that spell be? Like that's kind of fun and creative and like weird. Or you can go, kind of more in the other direction with like Glog, the Goblin Laws of Gaming. Has like a really cool magic system, but the spells are a little bit more well defined. And so like there's a whole like range of it, but it's never, I don't think I've ever seen a spell as well defined as like, say, like how invisibility or fireball works in 5e. Yeah. But yeah, like there's like, you can be more creative if you want to define the spell differently. Yeah. It's like, oh, can I use the fireball spell instead to make like a jet of fire like coming out of my hands? And it's like, sure, why not? Who cares?
This lock or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you'd use burning hands. Yeah. Obviously.
It's like, well, I don't have burning hands. It's like tough nuts.
Yeah. So Shade, you were saying that you were.
Yeah, so I mean, I would, and I know Franco, I think you and I largely agree on this, that you don't have to run your 5e games. You've already said this sentence. Your 5e games, you take principles from OSR and you can apply them. And I would say, you could do that with any rule set. And while there's value, I think the reason that the more modern editions have some of this more prescriptive rulings and things like that is, in some respects, kind of it's to make it more of a gateway entry point into the hobby. Because if you're having a limitless possibility, which is at the end of the day what a TTRPG can do for you. Some people are going to go, I just don't know what to do, and there's going to be a kind of this struggle on the referee, the game master, the GM, the DM, whatever, kind of trying to explain things without saying you have to do this or that, but like make sure that they're giving enough information for the player, and the player still also having that feeling of agency of like, I made this decision. And I made this creative decision. And so having kind of I think that is a value of these more modern editions, having this tool set and being able to look at it and go, okay, I wanna burn stuff, so I'm gonna throw fireball because that's gonna burn stuff. Cool. Now, if a player were to say to me, hey, I want to do so, one of my personal favorite examples in more recent gameplay is we had a monk. We had like a carriage that turned into a mecha kind of stuff. Yeah, a dreadnought. And there were a couple of nightmares that had been leading the carriage, but now they had detached. And so, like, one of the players decided he wanted to Haryoken a fucking nightmare into the carriage because there was a ward in there that would cause an explosion. It was this whole fucking thing. Is there a mechanic for that in 5e? Abso-fucking-lutely not. But I can look at that. I can look at some of the tools that they have and the resources specifically, and I can go, if you burn this, resource and this resource, we're going to let this happen this time. Now, you do have to, of course, consider that might be like, I want to do that all the time, always. And that's kind of where the rulings and refereeing comes in later, but it's something you could totally do in a 5e game. Okay,
but the monk can only do that because you've decided that he could do that because he has key points, because you're like, oh, he has that ability. You know, it's like, oh, he has the ability to punch really good, so he can uppercut. Would the fighter be able to do that? Would the druid? Would the ranger?
I mean, but that I think is a valid question even in a basic OSR game, because
totally.
You know,
I think it is. I think you're right. I'm just trying to specify that, like, the reason that they're able to do that is because it's established in the fiction. Like, if you pretend that game is not run with any rules at all.
Yeah.
And all you're doing, you have zero rules. I'm not talking about an OSR game. I'm talking about zero rules. Yeah. I want to uppercut this horse into this carriage so that it can explode a magical ward that's inside of there.
Yeah.
And you say, like, okay, great. How do you do that?
Yeah.
And so they say, like, well, I have really good martial arts training. My martial arts training is amazing. So, like, awesome, you do it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, that's it's and I think I understand what you mean, like creating these like having the framework is important. And I think there's a lot to be said about, like, you know, what's a good introductory RPG.
Yeah.
But you know, I think that the frameworks can still exist depending on how, you know, you are playing your game. Like, I think, like, if you run, like, that's a fictional situation. You're playing along with the fiction. You're playing along with the story that this person is strong enough to uppercut a horse into a carriage.
Yeah.
And so if you're like, yeah, he's like a superhero, you can do that type of shit. It's like, great, you do it. And I think that's like I would argue that the rules for that ruling got in the way of doing something like that. Like, the only way, I don't want to say the only way, but like one of the ways that you were able to do that is because you're a really experienced GM, and you know that that's something within the rule set that you can tweak, or you can just do whatever you want. You're like, that's not that broken. I can make the judgment call or whatever, because you're working within this framework. Another GM might be like, no, you can't do that. That's crazy.
Right. And
I think it's it could be more limiting for some people than not.
I would agree, but I think that I think on the flip side of that, it is so in that respect, in some respects, in my mind, something like OSR or any of those principles tend to be, in my mind, for a player who is a little more experienced. Now, that's not to say you can't have OSR as your entry point. Tons of people do and did. But to me, you know, if I want something that is, okay, I've got a new player, I've got someone who doesn't really know how these things work, or I am new at running a game, I think it is helpful to have those guide rails, and then you can drive over those rails later when you get better?
I think that you could. I think you could also learn how. I think like the thing that you're trying to learn when you are playing TTRPGs is how to play in a pretend world. Yeah. Right. And so like is this 300-page like sets of these 3 books. How hard was it for you, Rio, to get me to play 5e and read the rules?
I don't even think you've read the rules yet.
I tell you guys all the time, I was so resistant to learning the rules for 5th edition. Sure. I was having the worst time with it. I was like, wow, all these fucking rules. I got to learn how this spell works. And now I know how everything works. And I'm just like, okay, I get it. Like I would say I'm like now partially an encyclopedia of 5e rules now. Like I know shit. Like I'll just like throw stuff out. I was like, I guess I fucking know all these rules now. I know that a rogue can get sneak attack on a reaction. I know other rules, etc. You get it.
That's the only one you needed.
That's the only one I needed. That's an important one. That's a fun one. But like it's just like I don't think that you need that much scaffolding.
That's fair.
Like I think that's like it's an overwhelming amount of scaffolding, and that for a game master especially, that is even more stuff that you have to learn. You get these monster stat blocks, and you're like, what the fuck am I looking at? You get a monster stat block in an OSR game, you're just kind of like, what the fuck am I looking at, actually? But it's shorter.
Really quick.
Yeah.
I want to take us to a break before we start going into like why play OSR in our second half and all of these type of things as well.
Yeah.
Whatever. See you on the flip side.
Are you the kind of person or unspeakable nightmare horror who likes actual play podcasts, but occasionally wants a break from all the high fantasy heroics? If so, you should check out Negative Modifier, an actual play podcast that specializes in darker, more mature games. You can find us on YouTube, Twitch, and more or less anywhere else podcasts can be found.
Welcome back to the OSR pod tabletop. Okay, here we are.
You want to commit to that? You want to try that again?
So, yeah, I'm going to commit. I feel good about it. Okay, we're going to keep it, and we're going to keep moving forward in a really intelligent and construction.
I wanted to get back to something that I was talking about with the monster thing, right? I think that, and the thing that you were kind of talking about a little bit, Shade, is that there is also a downside a lot of times, because a lot of these OSR games, when they are written assuming that you know how to play TTRPGs.
Yep.
I think that is a downside to a lot of these games when you pick them up. I think something like Cairn is a little bit more friendly. I think Cairn 2e is going to be better for this. I remember the first time I read Cairn, there's like so many questions about like exactly like what happens when you do this, or how do you do that? Like, what does that mean? Like, I don't understand. I think there's a lot of, like Knave was also like that for me and stuff. And then there's like a lot of assumptions a lot of these games make, because they assume that you have the common vocabulary of like, what is an armor class? What is this? What is that? So a lot of these games are kind of written for people that already play TTRPGs.
Insiders.
Yeah, and I think that can be a problem.
Yeah, it's actually a good point. In our recent episode with Rascal Games, one of the reporters there was talking about how the TTRPG community is kind of unique in that all of the consumers are like hyper educated on the product.
Well, and a lot of people that you talk to in these blogs, or like even in like the Discords that I'm in, they're usually just referees. It's very rarely that like a lot of them are players. It's like the opposite problem that you have in other circles.
One other question I want to get to, because so I've been playing some Morkborg recently. Morkborg, get ready for a review eventually. But this is, I would say, like it is a OSR styled system.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's in the NSR.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it basically,
if you need categories, Gygax nerd.
It basically like
I like guide rails.
You can roll something up, and the way it works is very, very loose. To your point earlier, like the descriptions aren't like this does this. It's like this is this genre of thing. Use it however you wish. Yeah. And sometimes it will have a thing like this poison must be applied via the eye, and so then you're like, okay, well that's a very specific thing I have to do to get this effect. But I will say one thing that I've noticed while playing these kinds of games. Usually I've only played in short form so far. Haven't done like more of a long-term campaign in one. How do you like handle growth in these games? Because your character really it doesn't really like level up and doesn't change in a way of like a 5e or something like that, where you're getting new moves and stuff.
Yes. So a lot of these games, I think there's a what? What's wrong?
Rio did a level up symbol.
I think there's.
That was just for Nick, but it can be on the podcast.
Yeah, I think there's this tendency to assume that like a lot of these ultralight games can't be sustained for long-term campaigns. I don't think that's accurate. I think
Totally.
there's.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Just like I had a blast tonight, and
Yeah.
like we could.
And you're
keep
like,
going.
oh, I could whatever.
Yeah. But and so a little bit of this is adjust via items, where items act a little bit more like abilities, a little bit.
Kind
in
of.
that
So-
they come in and you're able to
Yeah.
do specific stuff based
Yeah.
on what you've gathered, but. Like my character hasn't changed. It's not like I'm not going to hit a threshold and then be able to punch 3 times or whatever. You know.
Why would
like,
you need that?
No.
You know, yeah. You know, it's like well, so for example, like in things like I guess like in basic and expert, like there's levels. Like you can level up in OSE, you can level up in AD&D, you can level up. There's games with levels. There's also something like Into the Odd or Cairn and the Odd Hacks and stuff and all those similar games like. Mythic Bastionland, which is coming out as well, which is another Into the Odd base game that is more like an Arthurian Knight type of thing. Like you have like these things that you were like trying to do and that can that can up your stats a little bit. But it's not based on like, oh, I got this amount of gold and I brought it back to town and now I gain a level. And it's not like, oh, I fought a bunch of monsters or I did this to gain levels and all that, kind of non-diegetic bullshit.
Yeah.
Like it's some like the ways that you advance in these like more ultralight systems are via, what's it called? The thing that I was saying, diegetic growth.
Yeah.
Like you eat a dragon's heart and now you can breathe fire.
Right.
That'd be fucking sick, right?
Yeah.
Like
that's sort of like
it's not like
the referee
it's like,
concept again, where you're just
yeah.
like, this happens and now you have this, put it on your character sheet somewhere. Yeah.
And instead of like, oh, I fought enough monsters and now I can hit you 3 times, like that doesn't make any sense. Like what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
I think another really cool way to advance is I don't know how often this has happened, but like you can like train in a weapon. So like it's like, oh, if you hit a monster like 10 times with this weapon, like you gain a +1 to the weapon, or anytime you attack with the weapon, it's the die size goes up 1 or whatever, something like that.
One thing I will say about the games I've played with you and the games I've played of Morkborg and things, is that it feels as though the monsters are really tough.
Yeah.
Basically forever. It's not going to be like, oh, there's only 5 bandits, we're fine. It's like, man, like one of those bandits could kill one of us.
Yeah, because they're as strong as you.
Yeah, and also like the hit point levels for you and the monsters are roughly equivalent, and you kind of roughly equivalently do the same amount of damage.
Yeah.
So it's like always going to be rough.
I think the reason that I have gravitated more towards into the odd style games is because combat is faster. I remember when I ran like a knave hack that I was doing. With it was a Robbers of the Crystal Frontier adventure. It was like a mini adventure or something. I forget what it's called. But you guys just kept missing. You just kept rolling d20s and missing, and then you hit sometimes and you miss. And I'm like, fuck this sucks. And so I think like there's games where it's just like, oh, you have lower HP. You always hit. Every time you attack, you always hit. They always hit. And it's just faster. Like just pick up the pace. Like if you were fighting, something's gone wrong. Yeah. Like if you don't have a really good plan, if you didn't like fucking just like, it's like, okay, I'm gonna like put a bunch of the flour. I'm gonna put a bunch of flour and set it all on fire, and I'm gonna kill this and I'm gonna blow this bandit up before he even knows that you're awake. Great. It's combat as war, not combat as sport.
That makes a lot of sense because misses don't really tell the story and doesn't really engage. So why even have them in there?
Yeah, exactly. It's like why are we just whiffing all the time?
Yeah. One thing I experienced in Morkborg is that you still roll to hit or miss or whatever. It's just the thresholds of hitting are way lower. So like, and for you and them. So like, I think 14 was like a boss monster like that we were encountering, like this huge like blob creature that was like, it was crazy. Anyway, but it had like it was the only monster we encountered that had like an auto hit that we always hit because it was just so big. But the thing about it that made it scary was like you get kind of went in there without a plan, you start hacking at this thing, but it doesn't seem to care that you're like carving bits of it out because there's just so much of it, kind of thing. So like it was an interesting reevaluation where we had to be like, okay, yeah, what's in this room that we can use? Because we started like having to think a bit more creatively, which I liked. And I like the idea of combat as like street fighting. Like you're using everything available to you.
Right.
You're not,
You're not like waiting
Ain't
turns.
no rules in a street fight.
Yeah, exactly.
OSR.
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
So I kind of want to say like give your general pitch for both a player and a GM to somebody who is like maybe D&D is comfortable, but they're like thinking about other things. Give a pitch to both a GM who might want to move to a OSR and to a player who might want to move to
I would
an
say to
OSR.
both of them, there's just fewer rules. So think about that. For a DM, I think it can be a little bit difficult to like try to think of things on the spot, but I think it's kind of about like negotiating with your players and being like okay, let me just like see what this could be, or I think it becomes like more conversational. It becomes more not collaborative, but I guess collaborative in a way. Like it becomes more like you have to like trust each other a lot.
Yeah.
Because you have to trust that the referee is actually impartial, and you have to trust that the players aren't like trying to get one over on you or like trying to just like beat the thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Like you have to be like very dispassionately connected from the things that are happening. Like you're not like expecting something. Like you don't have to like plan a big plot. You don't have to like, I mean, you don't have to do that with anything. So I guess that's like the philosophical side of it. I guess like for some of these systems, I guess if like you want to, if I had to like pitch a system, like if you wanted to play Cairn, it's very fast to get started. And you can just pretend to do stuff, whatever you want. I don't know.
The thing for a GM that I would pitch just from my experience is like I've had the experience several times GMing somebody being like, how does that work? And me being like, I fucking don't know. And like, I do this, I guess. And then someone else is like, I don't think that's how that works. And like,
you mean like a specific like spell or effect in 5e, or
yeah,
or
or it's like, oh, I jump off this ledge and I'm trying to land on a monster.
Yeah.
And it's like 20 feet down. Like, how much damage do I
Yeah.
take or whatever? And it's like, I don't. It's like 10 feet equals X amount of dice or whatever. In an OSR game, you can be like, you're gonna break both your legs, but you could probably do this.
I mean, yeah, it's like, oh, it's. I think in Cairn that would be like a dex save, and if you miss the dex save, you fall on the floor and you take damage directly to your dexterity stat.
Yeah, right. And so it's like much easier to allow for more flexible thinking, which I think is very fun for experienced players because they're able to kind of make whatever they want happen, and then they can adjudicate that on the spot rather than having to stop down and be like, we have to find these niche rules or whatever it is.
Yeah.
For players, though, I think that like the same thing, you can be a lot more creative with your interactions with the world, which I think is great. But I feel like I haven't really delved deep in them in like a long form thing to feel how that feels over the course of a campaign. So far, I've really enjoyed my dipping of toes into different systems, and I've always had like come away being like, that was a really fun one shot. Like I had like good character stuff happens. Like Ryu and I played a game where we were just these two old men who were like maybe used to be adventurers, but like had memory problems, and they had to go in to try to find like a sapphire or something from a kid wizard. And we were having a blast, and it was very fun, and it was silly.
Oh yeah, the kid wizard.
Yeah, because we like went in there, and then we
That was
were
Winter's
like,
daughter,
what are we
I
here
think.
for? I don't know. Okay, you big lummox, let's get out of here. Like that kind of thing happened, which was great.
Those were good old guys.
Yeah.
You guys almost got petrified by a mirror.
That was right. Yeah. And we like turned the mirror around to something else. But then like in Morkborg, like I was able to take big swings, feel like big consequences happened, and then have a new character right out.
That is the other thing is like I think because I think like the lethality thing is not like part of it. it's not like, oh yeah, it's really lethal and blah blah blah. And it's like, it's not that it's lethal, it's that the consequences are real.
Yeah.
Like there are actual consequences to your decisions, and I think that's like what gets taken away out of a lot of like 5e games, just because of the HP bloat.
And there's ways to mitigate anything.
Yeah, like death saves and HP bloat and stuff like that.
There's a way to drag a fully dead person back into the living realm. So it's like,
But I mean, I would argue you have that.
Well,
in
that's like a
OSR
quest,
game,
though.
too.
That would be cool. Yeah, that's fine with me. I think it's just like the ways to prevent death. I think the ways to bring people back from the death, and like that can be fun. Yeah, it's like, I have to fucking get a diamond. Like, oh no, but like, you bring them back.
There's
and
only
they're not
one
quite the
diamond
same.
of that size, and it's in the casino. We gotta get it out.
Oh, fuck,
Casino
that's sick.
heist.
I love that. Oh, that's great. And then you roll up a new character to save your old character, and you're like, I like this guy better.
The one thing I would say on this too would be like, I just have never played for that long, so I wonder how sustainable the things are, just because I haven't tried it, so I can't speak at it. I had a great time every time, so I feel like it's there. The big consequences, I do feel like, make it a little hard. Like, you have to go in knowing that character probably won't last the whole way through.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like,
I mean, there's ways to mitigate that too. If you're like, oh, I want to play on soft mode, and you're just kind of like, yeah, you get knocked out. And But I mean, there's cool shit in like Cairn. You can make monsters. So like when you go below your hit point total, you go down to your strength score, and you get taken away from there, and that's like physical real damage.
Yeah.
And some monsters have abilities that will instantly kill you if you fail the save that you need to do that. So like some monsters are just like, oh, I'm like a bandit, and I just cut you up, and then you're down, and I'm like, I'm going to focus on your friends now.
Yeah.
Or you're like fighting a dragon, and it's like, yeah, its critical damage effect is that it
like
fucking eats you.
Yeah.
It fucking ate you. Like, it wants to eat you. Like, it's not going to be like, oh, he's unconscious, okay, he's going to stay down. Like, there's a lot. I think Rio does a good job of like, whenever you'll have monsters sometimes where they'll be like,
step on you.
yeah, where they'll like, you get knocked down, and then the monster's
and
like,
you get up again.
no, you gotta, the character goes down, and the monster's like, I'm not going to stop attacking you. I'm going to eat you.
Yeah, that's what they're there for.
Their motivation.
Yeah, it's
like, oh, this one stopped moving. I'm going to. No, you're going to eat the thing and go.
Yeah, it's like, you're gonna pick up your prey, and you're gonna leave,
run away.
Yeah. I think too, like the thing about OSR games, or the thing about like, I don't know, it's a philosophy. It's not like a game thing, but it's like, you're more free to do things that are more realistic like that, where you're just like, oh, you're fighting a group of bandits and you guys have the upper hand, one of them gets killed, and there's like, oh, fuck this, I'm out of here. Like, it's like, oh, I'm gonna fight to the death. I was like, I'm a fucking bandit. Like, I'm a coward. Like, I steal from people for a living. I'm leaving. Like, and that never happens in 5e. They always fight to the death.
Well, and I think that's just a play, or the DMs failing.
I think that's a thing that gets taught to DMs.
But it
happens in a lot of our games.
It happens in a lot. I'm going to agree.
All the time.
It's not what the core book would necessarily say. It doesn't,
But there's not a good mechanic in 5e for morale saves.
That's fair.
Right.
There's no morale, like the rules
Mark has one.
Yeah, the rules in 5th edition do not support certain types of play.
It's in the DMG. There is stuff, but it's not.
It's optional in secondary. They dig to find it.
Can I quickly throw out
reaction rolls are still reaction rolls are
the DMGs where most of your OSR principles are going to be found,
and they're all optional.
Well,
but Nicholas, you wanted to throw out something real quick.
Thank you, Rio. Was that?
Are we going to start yelling at each other?
No, I said my piece.
The one thing that I'm sort of cautious about when suggesting an OSR thing to like newer players is that it can sort of feel like it's trapping you in a certain mode of play, like you were talking about, with this like
dungeons or whatever,
and specific settings, dungeons, and all that kind of stuff. I would say that it is super flexible to not do that. Mm-hmm. So far, I feel like my concern about somebody playing this when they're kind of new is that they're going to kind of turtle up all the time, and that they're not going to make big swings. They're not going to make big choices because they're going to fear the consequences of them, which is totally fine. But I think that is...
It's a different mode of play.
It's a different mode of play, and I also think it is something that is a tone that has to be set at the table.
There was something that Sean did when his character got downed by an acid troll in one of the one shots that I ran, and he and this is not rules as written in Cairn, but I let him do this because it was cool. He had like a flask of like alchemist fire or something, and he was downed, but he could probably still have been saved. But he was like mostly passed out or whatever by the rules. But then he was like, "Can I take this like alchemist fire thing and blow us both up?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely, you can."
Yeah.
And so like that type of character decision is easier when you're playing a one shot.
Yeah.
But it is still a character choice that you could make. Like sacrificing yourself to save the others is a valid character choice. Like you can make bigger, more dramatic swings like that. On the flip side, you can also die ignobly.
Yeah.
But it just adds on to the mythos of the world.
Yeah.
I think it's like you basically, as a player, you have to be more interested in what the world is doing, how the world is interacting to how you're poking at it. And if it destroys you, then that's just adding more to the mythos of like, the Nightwick Abbey is fucking eating you.
Yeah.
Like you come back and he's like, oh, is that Bill Stabhams? He's walking down the hall.
Yeah.
Oh no, he's taken now.
Yeah.
He's been taken by them and he's going to attack us now.
Yeah, and it's also kind of an interesting thing too. Is like history is written by the victors. So like people who come back and talk about their heroic like traipsing through a dungeon. It's like those are 5 people out of maybe the 100 that went to try to conquer this dungeon. You know what I mean? So it's like there's also that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, it becomes the story of the party, not the story of the individual characters.
Yeah.
And you just have to be okay with that as a player. I mean, it's just like, if that's not your bag, it's not your bag.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not going to police your fun.
It's a little bit less maybe personal in some ways, like people.
Yeah.
Like actual.
But it can be personal because you're like, oh, I miss that guy.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's just like tragic.
Yeah. Remember when he did that troll thing? The fucking cool.
Fuck, that was amazing. But
I named my kid after him.
Yeah, and you could.
Yeah.
But like
Your next character.
Yeah, the next character's name is Bill 2, Hank 2. Yeah, I don't know.
Any final thoughts on OSR before we close up shop?
Steal from it. Run whatever game you want. Smash everything together for any system. It's all fucking feasible.
Yeah.
No rule is
Just right.
No rules.
No rules, just
rules,
right.
just
we
right.
love that.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's my marriage. I'm not married. No
My
rules, just right.
non-existent marriage.
My non-existent. That's what happened. No rules. That's my final thought. Yep.
Okay. Franco,
Wait, yeah,
final
Rio.
thoughts
What do you think based on everything that
I
we
think
just?
that I take a lot of those concepts and I put them into my games currently already.
Exactly.
Because it's just more fun to do stuff like that. Why have if you have the ability to cast magic spells, why can't you just do weird shit with it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say just
Follow your bliss.
Apologies, that was me stepping on you there. I was gonna say with regards to the 5e fireball things, I meant to say this earlier. I do think that like you need to like if a character has fireball but they have no other fire magic and they want to do what would essentially be like a prestidigitation type of thing, you need to scale it and say, okay, cool, use one first level spell slot to do this. Like there's ways to do that in a 5e setting.
make a spell attack, make like an intelligence save or wisdom save or an arcana check and see if you can control the fireball
because
down
that's
to a
another
point.
great way to do it.
And if it doesn't work, then you
consumes
just
you.
fucking blow up the whole spot with a real fireball instead of just a little bit of a spark.
Another great way to do that. Yeah, I like that.
But I think fewer rules just right. Cool. For me, I want to get down there. I want to strip all these rules down. I want to stop having long fights. It's mostly the fights.
Yeah.
I love the fights.
They just take forever.
Yeah.
Which can be really fun, but it's also kind of like, what are we doing here? Can it still be fun and still be short? Because I think Mythic Bastionland has added some really interesting like tactical decisions that you can make as well. Like you can still have interesting tactical decisions made even if you just have 3 HP.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Well, if you want to hear more conversations like this, you should like and subscribe. This podcast releases every Monday. And if you want to contact us about a specific topic you want to hear about on the podcast, go to our website, tabletopod.com, fill out that conversation form. It'll go straight to our email. All right, everyone.
See you later. Bye.
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 Bye.